So this week we're going to take a break from social media strategy to talk about paid, owned, and earned media. Paid, owned, and earned has been a part of public relations and strategic communications forever. And it's a way of describing the different places where you can get your brand out, the different media, where your brand can be seen. So, paid media, the thing that makes paid media is that you pay for it. Here's some examples. The most obvious is TV commercials. TV commercials, you not only do you pay to make them, but you pay to put them on television. And they are the classic example of paid media. Some less well-known ones include sponsorships, um, which can be, online sponsorships, which we might know a little bit as sort of YouTube marketing maybe, or influencer marketing. But also offline sponsorships. Anytime, Nike gives, oh God, I can't even think of a good basketball player name, but I'm sure you'll fill it in for me. But anytime they give someone a pair of shoes, that's essentially paid marketing because they are paying for that. Paid search ads to Google. You may have heard of SEM, which is search engine marketing. Um, and that all involves buying keywords so that when someone searches on those keywords, your brand floats to the top. It's the first thing people see. And then, of course, promoted posts on Facebook or Twitter. There are ads on Facebook, right? We've all seen the ads. They're usually in the right-hand side, or now they're more likely to be in line in the middle of the content. But you can also pay to get your post in front of a larger audience, and that's a very, very powerful tool. So paid really works on social media, and it's important not to sort of discount it. But the major point on this slide is that for something to be paid media, you have to pay for it. Now, what do you get for your paid media? You get brand awareness. You get reach, right? When we buy a television commercial, what generally is the point of the television commercial? It's to remind people that the brand exists. Most television commercials are about letting people know that the brand is out there and what that brand can do for you. Now, there are some television commercials that contain a direct action to take to purchase. But the primary purpose, since we're not going to immediately leap up from our couches and run to the store, our primary purpose is brand awareness. The great thing about brand awareness is that social media is really good at expanding reach. Any paid campaign, let's say TV or billboards or magazines, can be amplified through social media. So not only does social media have its own paid avenues through things like ads on social or promoted posts, but any paid campaign usually can also be amplified. Social media can help it. So then we get to owned media. And what makes owned media is that you own the channel on which it appears, right? You own how it is displayed. You pay to create the media, but for instance, you own the web page that it shows up on. That's what I mean by a channel, like a web page, a blog. You own your own mobile app. Again, you paid to have it made. We always pay for content creation, but you own the app. It belongs to you. No one can take it away from you. The only way it's going away is if you decide to pull it from the App Store. You host the mobile app. You host, or you probably don't host, but you own the hosting service where your blog is placed. You might even own the servers, in which case you'd host your own blog. and the same thing with a web page. The only way those are getting pulled is if you decide to pull them. We contrast this with partially owned media. Partially owned media are the common social channels that you know of: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Pinterest, etc. All the social channels are partially owned. Why do we call them partially owned? Because you curate your site. You create the material that goes on your site, you put it up there. You own that process. However, the back end, the channel that it's going up on, the servers that it's going up on, are owned by someone else. They also, therefore, own the data that's generated from those pages, which can be a really important consideration. So think about the people, think about Vine. You know, what happens when Vine disappeared? All of a sudden, all that content, right, exists, but you couldn't add to it. And you ran the risk that one day it would disappear. So that's why we call those partially owned, because you do not control everything. You do own the content, right? And you can add more content or take content away, right? You have control over it. But ultimately, the platform it appears on is not owned by the brand. It's owned by Facebook. It's owned by Google in the case of YouTube. It's owned by Twitter. It's owned by Pinterest. In the case of Instagram, it's owned by Facebook again. So that's important, the difference between owned and partially owned. Very important. Partially owned is generally social media. So what do owned and partially owned do for a brand? They increase engagement. They create a community, and they create loyalty. So engagement means that you and your customer base are communicating in a two-way fashion. They are sending stuff to you, and you are sending stuff to them. That's the definition of engagement. Right? And by doing that, you create a community of like-minded people who really like your brand, who know where to find information about your brand, usually on an owned or partially owned channel, by going to your web page or by going to a social media outlet that you've branded your page on, right? That's the community. And through creating a community, you can create loyalty. I'm sure you've noticed your professor's a huge Disney fan, right? So I can engage with Disney by going to their web page. In fact, I go to the My Disney Experience web page all the time to look and see, to make my reservations, but also just to see what hotels are on sale and if there's cool new things happening. That's increasing my engagement with Disney. I also go to their Facebook pages, or I actually look a lot at their Instagram. And by looking at the Instagram, I am part of a community that involves Disney. There's several actually interesting Tumblr pages that Disney doesn't even really own, but are dedicated to Disney. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I and the people who look at those pages are part of a community, and by allowing me to have information that just everybody doesn't have, because I frequent these pages, I develop a loyalty to Disney. Disney is really good at this. So that's how owned and partially owned work. And last, we have earned. Earned media was the traditional purview of public relations. What public relations tried to do was to generate earned media. And that was in the newspaper articles, for instance. You sent out a press release, and you hope someone picked it up and wrote an article about your brand. That's what public relations people did. That's earned media, because your efforts have earned you the place in someone else's owned media. The same true of TV mentioned. You're on Entertainment Tonight. That's earned media. You're not paying for that story, right? It's not an ad, but what you're doing or your efforts have earned you that spot. So we call that earned media. What does earned do for you? Well, particularly in the realm of social, which is what the class is about, influencer mentions. You earn influencer mentions. You can also pay for influencers, but the best kind of influencer is the one that picks you up and says, oh, this is great. Remember, I was talking about those Tumblr blogs that are dedicated to Disney, but they're not Disney employees, they're just fans. That's earned media. Disney does not pay for that, but because they have a loyal group of customers, a loyal group of people who are interested in them, they have earned all of those Tumblr blogs. There's a million outlets that are fan owned, right? Any fan owned media is earned media. You have earned that space, you're not paying for it. And the nice thing about earned is that it's viral because it's based on social sharing. You earn the shares. So as far as social media is concerned, the crux of earned media is sharing. Another place where earned media comes into play are product reviews. You earn that review. Good or bad, that review should be based on your product and your brand. So product reviews, which you do not pay for, are earned media. What does earned media give a brand? Earned media establishes credibility. The obvious example is product reviews. Before I buy anything, I usually look at product reviews because I want to know what other people think about it. If my friends tell me that something is really awesome, I am more likely to believe that that thing is awesome. It now has increased in credibility with me. If a lot of people are sharing the awesomeness of a product or a service, I now, again, am more likely to believe in its awesomeness. It has established credibility, which is so important in an age where we don't necessarily believe television advertising anymore. We don't necessarily believe, sort of any type of ad. We are more inclined to believe the people that we know. So this sort of earned credibility is the basis of convincing people to buy things. And you also broaden your reach, because with earned media, and remember, earned media is sharing, you're hoping to get some sort of virality, which means that someone shares it, right, to 2 people, and those 2 people share to 4 people, and those 4 people share to 16 people, and that's about as far as I can do that math. But you get the idea that it increases 2-fold every single time, and eventually it just skyrockets. And remember, earned media, right, and that virality issue can be both good and bad. I mean, the YouTube video of the bloody man being dragged off a United Airlines flight went viral. That was earned media. Probably not the earned media they wanted, but that was earned media. So it's not always a force for good. Sometimes it's a force for, well, I would still call that good, but it's certainly wasn't working in the brand's favor. But the important thing is to remember that earned media establishes credibility and it broadens the reach. More people see and hear about your brand. So how do these things work in either an agency or a company? Well, in the bad old days, we had what we called silos, right? Your ad team works separately from your content creation team, works separately from your public relations team. The ad team was primarily involved with ad buys. with paid media. Your content creation team was primarily involved with creating content that went out on your owned media. And your public relations team was primarily involved with generating earned media. So paid, owned, and earned worked separately for each other. They did not work together. They did not coordinate. They were in silos. In the new good days, or the way you should be doing it, everybody works together. There is coordination. You may not all be in the same office. There's still going to be ad people. There's still probably going to be content people, and there's still going to be public relations teams. Or if you're in a really small business, it's going to be you wearing 3 hats, which is another reason why it's important to think about these working off each other. But when they synergize, when they work together, it is much more efficient. What do you get? What do you get with social media in particular? You get more bang for your buck. You get a better way to balance the costs of paid versus earned and owned. So paid is the most expensive. Earned and owned have costs, but they are lower. And by using the 3 of them together, you can spread your costs out more evenly, and usually you can get a much better return for your costs. So when we talk about paid social media, we're talking about, promoted posts and sometimes ad. And paid social media does not need to mean endless spending, right? Because it can be used to boost owned media where the costs are lower. So let's talk a little bit about this. Traditional paid media is the television ad. Television's ads are usually ridiculously expensive. Think about the millions and millions of dollars people spend on, a Super Bowl ad. They cost a lot to make, and they cost a lot to put on the air. But if you took all that money, you could promote an awful lot of posts on Facebook. And those Facebook posts, if they're done well, will have just as large, if not larger, a reach than your television ad. So paid social media in and of itself can be more efficient than other paid channels. But further, your paid social, right, generates eyeballs for your unpaid social, which is owned or partially owned. It also generates eyeballs for your branded web page, your blog, right? Those truly owned channels that, again, have some costs because you're paying people to maintain them, but the costs are much lower than traditional paid ads. So paid works with owned by pushing viewers, pushing eyeballs from one to the other. So as I mentioned, right, well, not to mention, but as I mentioned, owned media needs a budget to create really good content. Not as large a budget, perhaps, as your television commercial, but it still needs a budget. And earned media needs an investment to build that successful campaign that's going to go viral. So they both need money. They just don't need as much as paid media does because you're not actually paying to put it out there. So what we're talking about here is the cost of acquisition, COA balancing act, right? You have a limited budget, right? And sometimes your budget gets cut, or sometimes you just plain run out of money, right? Or you realize that you have to reduce the amount that you're spending. So if you're running TV ads, right, you can only run them every so often. You can only run them maybe once a month, or maybe you run them for 6 weeks, but then you have to take a break of 3 months because you can't afford to keep running them for that entire time, right? Because it gets expensive. Well, now, if you have to take that break, if you use your paid, right, particularly if you use your paid social media to push people to your owned and earned media, right, they're still going to have reminders of your brand. They're still going to hear about you through your owned and earned. You don't disappear entirely. If my whole budget was television commercials, if my television commercials are not on the air anymore, you're not hearing about me. But if those television commercials push you to social channels where the discussion continues, where you get more information about my brand if you're interested, then you do not lose contact with the brand. I don't just disappear off your radar for 3 months, right? So that's how we balance the cost of acquisition across paid, which generates reach, right? Owned, which encourages community and loyalty, and earned, which generates sort of virality and keeps the conversation going even when I am no longer paying for paid. So the good new way again, right? We have synergy. Everything works together, and we have amplification. Everything works together and makes each thing better, right? Because I am paying, again, let's stick strictly with social for just a second. Because I am paying to promote some posts to get a new audience, some of that new audience is going to be interested in what I'm talking about and is going to come back to my Facebook page where they will look at additional owned media or partially owned media. And in that partially owned media, they're also going to be directed back to my web page and my blog, which is my fully owned media, and they will go there. Some of those people will be so excited about what they read that they will repost to their friends. And now I'm generating earned media. And those friends will be so excited about what they read from their friends, they're going to come back to my web page, which is my owned media. And also, when they see a promoted post from me, which is paid, they'll be more likely to share that paid post with their friends, which is increasing the reach of my paid media. So that's how everything works together, and it makes all of it better. Gives all of it much more impact. So, do we really need paid? And that's going to be a question that I guarantee your supervisor is going to ask you, because many, many people think social media is free, which of course is a problem since we want to get paid for it. And here's the answer. I encourage you to, in fact, I insist that you read the Social Media Examiner post. I have linked to it in the module. But what they found was I believe it's 2016, maybe well, it was in 2016. I think the information's from 2015. That 76% of business to consumer respondents used promoted posts, and 61% of those rated them as effective, effective being 4 or 5 on a 5-point scale. 74% used ads on social media, and 59% of those rated them effective. From 2014 to 2015, and this is perhaps the more interesting statistic, the number of marketers viewing social ads and promoted posts as effective went up by 20% for social ads and 30% for promoted posts, which, by the way, I think speaks to the fact that promoted posts work better in social media because they're a very integral part of the way social media is laid out. We all know what an ad looks like, but a promoted post I guess, appears more genuine. But anyhow, certainly marketers felt it was more effective. A good example of why paid social media, particularly promoted posts, are so important comes when we look at Facebook. And Facebook is indeed taking over the world. Facebook decided it needed to monetize its platform more obviously or more successfully. And so they did that by dropping organic reach. What is organic reach? Organic reach is how many people see a post that you post on your timeline, specifically when you're a brand, right? Just because you posted it, right? And they dropped the number of people who could see your post by 52% in the first half of 2016. Now, what they said about that was that there were so many people on Facebook that they didn't want to inundate everybody with posts, so they began to curate what posts appeared on your timeline. Right? That's what Facebook says. But the effect of this was that when I post something, 52% fewer people see that now than saw that before 2016. So effectively, that means when you post something, it organically reaches between 15 and 10% of your subscribers. That's not very many people, right? I mean, compared to how many fans or subscribers you have, to only reach 10% of them organically is not very good. Some people suggest that that actually dropped as low as 2% of your subscribers, and here is my reaction to that. So essentially, Facebook killed organic reach. And why did they do that? Because they wanted you to pay. They wanted you to promote your post. When you promote your post, your reach skyrockets, right? Furthermore, you get to tell them, and you pay more for, how many people your post reach and exactly who in your subscribers that post goes to. You can pay for people who are non-subscribers to see a promoted post. So you can try and bring more people to your Facebook page or push more people to your branded web page or your blog. Right? So Facebook essentially said, guess what? Promoted posts are really good, and we're going to make you use them by really dropping the organic reach. The reach you get by just posting something without paying for it. And they're big enough, they are the #1 social media platform, that they can do that, and there's no place else for people to go. Now that may seem, I don't know, unfair, but Facebook's a business, right? And it's also not very expensive, which is another thing you need to keep reiterating to people when you're telling them, by people I mean your boss, when you're telling them why you need to do paid social, why you should be paying for things that are on your partially owned channel of Facebook. Galen Ward, the CEO of a real estate search engine, Estately, wrote a post for Facebook called 37 Things You Should Know Before Moving to Seattle. His target was Seattle sports fans, people who said that Seahawks were one of their interests on Facebook. That's how he set his target market. So these were not people who were necessarily subscribers or fans of his page. It was people in the entire realm of Facebook who said they were fans of the Seahawks. He spent $100. That's like nothing. He spent $100, and of that he got 8,500 likes and tens of thousands of visitors to his website. Right? So with that, each like, those likes let the people who like it, right, their friends can see that. Right? And obviously it worked because tens of thousands of visitors went to the website. People who liked his post maybe shared his post, right? Because if you share it, now you're expanding your reach. Other people saw it, and it's the typical Facebook spammy 37 things you should know, right? But it worked. So for $3, right? Your click-through margin of $3 for a 5% click-through rate, right? That's incredible. A 5% click-through rate is really high. For less than $100, we got our post in front of 30,000 people, right? Without Facebook, right? It could have been, no one could have read it. If he just posted that on his blog, the only people who would have seen it were the people who were fans of his blog, which may not have been a lot of people. If he put it on his web page, only the people who already went to his web page would see it. And who guarantees that that would be anybody? But by promoting it through Facebook, right, for $100, 30,000 people saw it. He got 8,500 likes, and he got a significant quantity of visitors who went to his website to check it out further. He expanded his reach and drove traffic to his website. And for $100, it's so worth it. So, while yes, Facebook sort of makes you pay for your reach, it's really effective. And that's the kind of thing you need to remember when you're talking to people, explaining to them why they need to pay for social. Why is paid social an important part of your paid, owned, and earned mix? The paid social on Facebook, right, pushed people to his owned media of his website, and the shares that he got, that's the earned media that helped also push more of those visitors to his website. I would be remiss in talking about paid social if I didn't talk about YouTube. YouTube, right, video, is one of the most cost-effective paid social platforms because you can promote a YouTube video, or you can run an ad. You all know those roll-ins, right? On YouTube, right? And if the viewer doesn't watch more than 30 seconds, you don't pay for it. And let me say, you can tell people a lot of things in 30 seconds, but furthermore, if they don't watch more than 30 seconds, they're not interested. So why would you pay for eyeballs that aren't interested? Contrast that to television, right? I see a lot of ads, most of them for health products that I do not need on my television, right? I'm not interested. If it was YouTube, I would have skipped that ad and the advertiser wouldn't have paid for it. So that's pretty awesome. So the takeaway from this is that all marketing, right, is that all strategic communication and brand awareness strategy need to be integrated through paid, owned, and earned. Advertising, the driver of reach, is still necessary, but it's no longer the only factor. When you're doing marketing, when you're doing strategic communication, you should focus on, the product and the service. The advertising is not the most important thing. And that by integrating it with social media, right, by using paid social, owned social, and earned social, right, you can spread these great ideas about your product and your service. The lines, I'm not going to say they're blurred, actually. The lines are interconnected between paid, earned, and owned, and partially owned, right? But they all push to each other, right? Your promoted post gets shared, and now it's earned media, right? Your earned media drives people to your web page, which is owned media. Your owned media, which may be a blog, may contain a post which people who come to your blog share, and now that's earned media. So they're interconnected. You cannot separate them anymore. Campaigns that leverage all three types are much more successful because they have each of those types amplify each other. And with that, you can increase the stability in your communication and also the stability across your budget, because you don't need to dump all of your money into paid, right? And spend a lot and then sit back and wonder if it worked. You can dump somewhat less into paid and then continue to work off that paid advertising by using owned and earned throughout the rest of the sales cycle. So what do we need to really make this work at your company? Well, the first thing you need is someone who's in charge of all of owned, earned, and paid. Someone who understands how they synergize, right? And someone who can schedule and react to changes in all three. Someone who can set a combined strategy that uses paid, owned, and earned. And that is just starting to happen, right? Also, so they can assign responsibilities and goals to each of the three teams, right? The content creators should be creating content for both paid and earned, right? The paid people need to be sharing where they're putting their paid advertising, so that the owned and earned people need to know where they can pull from or push to, right? The earned people need to share what influencers they're working with, so that the paid and the owned people can also send people to those influencers, or who can look for responses coming from those influencers, right? Everyone needs to work together. Everyone on the team needs to understand all three media, right? They are expert perhaps in one, but they need to understand all three, and they need to understand how they work together. They have to connect and cooperate. You can't have a public relations team and an ad team and a marketing team that do not speak to each other. They have to like each other, at least a little, and they need to work together, because paid, owned, and earned media must work together in order to make a fully mature, fully functional branding strategy or marketing strategy. Remember, branding strategy, we're talking about a communication goal, so we're communicating about a company. A marketing strategy, we're talking about business goals, so we're talking about a return on investment and a generation of capital. But just so you know that it works, however, for both of those. You need paid, owned, and earned working together to make both the communication goals and the business goals come to fruition.